Hello. Welcome to the BYU Family History webinar series. I'm Marin, and I'll be your host for this webinar. In way of announcements, we will be having webinars in January. The schedule will be posted shortly. At this time, things are a little bit crazy here at the BYU Family History Library, but I'm sure next week that we will have that updated. This webinar will be recorded and posted on our website and our YouTube page. And you always can email us at fhl_webinars@byu.edu. If you have any technical problems during the webinar, please feel free to use the chat option, and I will do my best to help you with that. If you have any comments or questions during the webinar, we will answer those at the end. You're welcome to comment in the chat box, but all comments will be addressed at the end of the webinar. For today's webinar, we are having Kathryn Grant giving a presentation on adding FamilySearch Historical Records in the family tree. Kathryn is a teacher, writer, and family history enthusiast. She enjoys helping others build their family trees and believes that everyone can learn to love and do family history. Kathryn teaches Sunday classes at the BYU Family History Library and presents at other family history events. Her column on family history ran in the Nauvoo Times for about a year and is still available online. Kathryn works for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as a technical writer with a focus on usability and process improvement. Besides family history, she loves uplifting music, thought-provoking books, and fresh raspberries. And if Kathryn's ready, we'll just turn the time over to her.
Great, Marin, thank you so much. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we will be ready to go. Everybody, thank you so much for being with us today for this exciting webinar on FamilySearch Historical Records as sources. Let's go ahead and look at what we'll be covering today. If you heard the previous webinar, this is part 2 of a 3-part series, or a 3-part, not really series, but I guess it is, on sources. Actually, the whole series is getting the most from FamilySearch Family Tree. But this little section on sources has 3 parts, and last time I said it had 2 parts. And as I prepared this webinar, I realized there was so much to cover that we needed to go into 3 parts. So here's an overview. Last time we talked about sources in family history. We kind of went over some of the basics, and we also went over the sources tab on the person page in Family Tree. Today, we're going to do part 2, and we will talk about adding sources from FamilySearch Historical Records. And then finally, the next webinar, which will most likely be in January, it won't be this year for sure, it will be on adding memories as sources and also adding sources from other providers. So that kind of gives you some context for today's topic. I wanted to start out by saying I wasn't being facetious when I said that this was an exciting topic. I really do love sources. And some people might wonder why, and maybe other people are saying, yeah, we love sources too. So I wanted to comment briefly that I love sources because sources tell a story. So often they're mischaracterized as documents, dry and dusty documents that just have dry and dusty facts. But that's maybe a very narrow way of looking at them. I much prefer to say that sources tell us stories about our ancestors' lives. And as such, sources can turn hearts. I may have mentioned this before in a webinar, but I remember one time just sitting at the computer with tears streaming down my face as I reviewed cemetery records for a family who had lost several of their children within just days of each other. I imagined that it was probably some kind of severe illness, but my heart really turned to that family and went out to them for what they had gone through. So sources, and they're not all sad too. There's sources that can tell of wonderful achievements in somebody's life. Maybe a newspaper article about a golden anniversary or a career advancement or something like that. So sources do connect us with our ancestors and help us learn to know them as real people. So I really do love love sources. And I hope that all of us who are listening can also help those that we work with to love sources, because not everybody does, understandably. But I think we can get to the point where we just recognize the value of sources and really love them for the part they play in helping us connect with our families. Okay, with that little background, let's talk about FamilySearch Historical Records. And it's been interesting to me as a consultant to realize that there's a lot of confusion about what exactly FamilySearch Historical Records are. Some people think they're Ancestry.com records, which is actually not true. Ancestry is a completely separate entity, although they do partner with FamilySearch. Other people that I've talked to think that FamilySearch Historical Records are the same thing as family tree people. In other words, they don't see the difference between the family tree and historical records. So just to be clear and to make sure that we're all on the same page, let's just do a real quick crash course on FamilySearch Historical Records. So the way you get to them is going to familysearch.org and clicking search, and you end up with a screen that looks very much like this. This is a repository of records about people's life events. So it includes things like birth, marriage, death, census enumerations, military service, and more. All of these records, these types of records, can be found in FamilySearch Historical Records. The records were mainly created by churches, governments, and newspapers, so they tend to be pretty trustworthy. They're generally some sort of official or semi-official record, not just Aunt Susie said so, or somebody's memory that may not be exactly accurate. But these were records that were created to document something about our ancestors' lives. Some people have been surprised to find out that this is where indexed records live. So if you have participated in indexing, first of all, thank you, because that is such a great blessing to all of us who are trying to find information about our family. Well, this is where those indexed records end up. After you've done all that hard work, they are actually made available on the FamilySearch Historical Records site for everybody to search so that they can find information about their ancestors. Did you know? Okay, so as of a few days ago, I took this screenshot a couple days ago, and that would be December of 2018, if you're listening to the recording of this webinar. According to the FamilySearch website, there were 2,409 different collections. That is amazing. Think of that. Think of all those records that are available to us just with the click of a button. And in those over 2,000 collections, there are over 2 billion individual digital records. That is just incredible. There are only 1.2 billion people in Family Tree. So we've got way more records than we've got people in Family Tree. We've got an abundance of records to help us find information about our loved ones. Okay, so that's some background on FamilySearch Historical Records. Now let's talk about the process of attaching one of those records to a person in Family Tree. There are basically three ways to attach a FamilySearch historical record as a source in Family Tree. Number one is from a record hint. In turn, those record hints show up three different places, so we'll talk about that. But the second place that you can attach a historical record from is from the search records box on the person page. And then finally, you can just go directly to FamilySearch Historical Records to the site that we just looked at. So let's look at each one of those in turn. First of all, record hints. So where are the three places that you can see record hints? Probably the most common place and the most obvious place is on any person page. So if record hints are available, they're going to show up on the right-hand side here in the research help box. So this is on the person page details tab. But also, if you go to the Person Page Timeline tab, you can choose to show record hints as well. And what I love about this is they show up correlated with the event that they most likely apply to. So you notice here that this record hint at the top for Charlotte from 1848 correlates with her christening here in 1848. So most likely this is going to be some kind of a christening or birth record for Charlotte. There is one little caveat for that, and that is that you do need to choose to show these record hints. So if you don't see record hints when you go into the timeline, click the show option, and there's a checkbox there for enabling record hints to be shown. You can show and hide them from this drop down, this show drop down. And then finally, record hints show up on all of the tree views except for the fan chart. So you can see them on landscape, on portrait, and on descendancy view. The screenshot here is, of course, for landscape, but the others look much the same. They'll have the little icon that indicates the record hint. If your record hints are not showing up, again, you've got to make sure that they do. You've got to choose that option, and that option is chosen in Options. So you just click that, and you'll get a choice of different things you can show and hide in the tree views, and you just want to make sure that record hints are visible. So let's go back to the person page, since I think that's probably the most common place to attach a record hint, although all of them function very much the same. One thing I felt it was important to point out about record hints is that they have a very strong likelihood, about 98%, of being for the person whose page you're on. I can just about count on one hand the number of times I've seen a record hint on a person page that has not been for the person. The reason for this, I remember hearing Robert Kerr talk. He was the manager of searching at FamilySearch. He's since moved on to a different position at FamilySearch. But at the time, he explained that they've been really careful at FamilySearch to show you very high quality hints. So they may show you less hints, but they're going to be more likely to be right. We can compare that with Ancestry. If you've used suggested records in Ancestry, those are wonderful too. But Ancestry casts a wider net. So you're going to get more hints on Ancestry, but they're not going to be quite as accurate. In other words, there's going to be a greater percentage of them that don't really apply to the person that you're looking at. In my experience searching on Ancestry, I would say their record hints are accurate maybe 85% of the time. So you do get more, but they're less accurate. And it's always a trade-off, right? So FamilySearch has made the choice to give you fewer results, but the ones that you do get are going to be highly accurate. Brother Kerr also explained that there's a little caveat about that as well. If you've got an unusual name in an unusual place, let's say Alexander Entwistle in Overdarwin, Lancashire, England, those hints for him are going to be very, very likely to be right. Whereas if you've got John Smith in New York, the accuracy percentage can drop a little bit, but I've still found they're pretty accurate. So these hints are really trustworthy, and what a blessing. It just makes finding our sources so much easier. So let's walk through how we would attach a source, attach a record hint as a source to a person and family tree. First of all, you very simply just click the record hint, and you get this little flyout screen that lets you kind of do a sanity check here to say, okay, does this look like it really applies? Again, most of the time it probably will, but if it doesn't, you can just click not a match, or you can just cancel out by clicking the X. But in most cases, you're probably going to want to click attach. And even here, this isn't an absolute guarantee. You're going to have a chance to review it again on the next screen. So we click attach, and we get taken to the source linker screen. Now, I found in working with people, especially new family historians, that this screen can be a little bit confusing. So I thought it would be worth it to kind of just explain the layout. On the left side of the source linker screen, you're going to see the information from the historical record. On the right side, you're going to see correlated the information from family tree. So you notice we've got Charlotte on the record across from Charlotte and family tree, and George on the record across from George in family tree. So family tree does its best to correlate the people in the record with the people in tree. It's not going to be 100%, of course, all the time. Sometimes you'll see that people are misaligned, but most of the time they will be correlated correctly. And when they're not, you can actually drag them to a new position to correlate them correctly. You'll notice, okay, remember that we started from Charlotte's person page. The hint was on her page. And because of that, she is called the focus person. She's the person that we're focusing on, basically. So she's got a blue banner here on the source linker so that we can easily tell who she is. And her section on the source linker is expanded when we open it up. You notice that John, her dad, his section is not expanded, and her husband George, his section is not expanded, but Charlotte's is, so that we can easily do that first comparison. So we look, and I'm going to blow this up again. That was pretty small. So we want this a little bigger to be more readable. So I look at this section for Charlotte, and I just again do a sanity check. Okay, name matches, sex matches, birth is close enough. The birth on the record was estimated, so I'm not concerned about that. There was no christening on this marriage record because in England, they normally didn't put christenings on marriage record. In fact, I don't know of any christening that was ever put on a marriage record. So that's why we've got no extracted record for the christening over here, even though we've got christening information in family tree. So at the bottom, we've got a place where we can add a reason statement, and there's a whole webinar on that if you're interested. Just go to our BYU Family History Library webinar page and look for reason statements. And when you've put in the reason statement, then you click attach, and the source is attached. And that is shown by the background turning green, and then also by this little paper clip. And if you want to see the details again, you can click details here. So we've attached the source to Charlotte, but what about attaching it to the other people that are mentioned in the record? Well, FamilySearch makes it so easy to do that. So again, you just click this little icon, like we mentioned, this to expand the section. And when we do that, we get the section very much like we got for Charlotte. We've got all the information on George from the record on the left side, and we've got all the information from family tree on the right side. So again, I just do a sanity check. The age matches, the year matches, the death was not recorded on the marriage, that's why it's not there, so that's fine. You notice down here under other information that family tree gives us the option to add marriage information for George. But the marriage information is already there. So in this case, I don't want to add duplicate information. So I'm not going to click this arrow to add the information to tree, but instead the reason it didn't recognize it as being the same, I'm guessing, is that the date is not standardized on the information in family tree. This looks like well, the place is standardized, the date isn't over here. And then over here, neither of them are standardized. So that's probably why family tree didn't recognize it as being exactly the same. But a human being looking at it knows that it is, right? So I'm not going to add this duplicate information. But once I finish adding the source, I can go in and standardize this. Now you'll notice down here that the reason statement that we added for Charlotte is automatically put in this reason statement box, which I love. It means I don't have to type the same reason statement or populate it over and over and over. It's just going to remember what I did last time. Now, if it's not what you need, if you need to edit it slightly, you can edit it right in this box. But in this case, this reason statement fits for George just as well as it did for Charlotte. So I'm going to hit attach, and then George's background turns green, indicating that that source has been successfully attached to him. So that's how you attach a record hint in Family Tree. Let's look at the next option, which is how you can attach a record that is found by using the search record box. And I like to just call these logo searches. That seems like an easy abbreviation. So we're going to click the logo, the FamilySearch logo, and it is going to take us to FamilySearch Historical Records. But the genius is that clicking the logo from the person page made it populate all Charlotte's information in here so that I didn't have to type it. And it just ran the search automatically for me. When I'm helping new people in my state with family history, everybody loves this, and so many people are unaware of it. It probably isn't something that pops out to you. You know, you might not necessarily think that clicking the logo on the person page would run this automatic search, but it does. It just made it so much easier for me to find all these records about Charlotte that are in FamilySearch Historical Records. Now, if the record has already been attached as a source, it's going to have this little pedigree icon on it. So I know that I don't need to attach those. But I look up here and I see there's no pedigree on this first source, so I want to take a closer look. I click the name of the person here, and when I do that, I'm going to see more detail just displayed right there on the screen, and a handy dandy button that allows me to attach it as a source. So I do a quick sanity check here. Is this right? Well, we've got Bescali instead of Bescaby, but you know what? Everything else lines up. So this looks to me like an indexing error. And in fact, when I look at the record, that's exactly what it is. So the fact that this name has been misindexed doesn't stop me from attaching it as a source. And in the last webinar, in part 1, we did talk about how you can edit the title of that source to correct indexing errors like this. And so it just corrects it for that source, but still to have it show up correctly on the person pages is a nice bonus. So when you click Attach to Family Tree, it's going to take you straight into the source linker, and then the process is exactly the same as we just saw. So we're not going to review that again. Once was enough, right? So that's how you how you attach a source that was found by doing a logo search on the person page. One thing that I also love about this search is that you can edit the search to find additional information. So you notice that because the search was done from her person page and her name was under her maiden name, the results that came up all had the last name of Chambers. But we know that she married a Bescaby, and I know that there are probably records for her as Charlotte Bescaby. Well, it's really easy to go ahead and just edit that last name and then click Update and run the search again. And this time, I'm going to get records for Charlotte Bescaby, and I can look at those, and each one, now see, these are not attached to anybody. So I can check those out, and if they apply to my person, then I can go ahead and attach them. And as it turns out, these all do apply to my person, so I'm going to want to attach them. So that's how you can attach records doing a logo search. Let's look at the last method, which is going straight to the FamilySearch Historical Records site and doing a search there. Now, you might be asking, if it's so easy to search from the person page, why would I ever come back to the Historical Records site and do a manual search? Well, one use case that I can think of is sometimes I'm searching in Ancestry and I may find somebody that I don't think is in Family Tree, or I just don't know if they are, but I want to see if FamilySearch has any records about them. So then I could come back here to the site and just run a search unattached to any person page, but just as kind of some preliminary fact gathering. So let's look at an example. We'll keep using Charlotte, even though I know she's in Family Tree. But I went ahead and entered her information in here so that I could do a search directly on FamilySearch Historical Records. And lo and behold, when I do the search, you come up with pretty much the same stuff that we came up from the person page. So as an example, we've got this record right here that does not have an icon, so it's not already attached to somebody. So I'm going to click the name of Charlotte, and that's going to, again, display that extra information on the screen. I do the sanity check. I say, yes, this looks like it really is for my person, and I'm going to click Attach to Family Tree. Now at this point, this is where the process is slightly different if you didn't start from a person page but just went straight to historical records. Because you didn't start from a person page, FamilySearch doesn't know for sure where to attach the record, but it's going to search and try and come up with some pretty good options for you. So it presents a list of possible matches. And as an aside, this is also a great place to find possible duplicates. If FamilySearch thinks that one christening record is about multiple people, there's a good chance these records are duplicates. So that just gives you kind of a heads up that you can check out those people and see if they really are and merge them if they are. But you look over this list and you see, who does this apply, or does this apply to any of the matches they've found? If it doesn't, you can look on your history list and it shows the same thing that you see when you click recents at the top of a person page. So if by chance it matches anyone you've recently been looking at, you can choose the person that way. Or if you know the PID, you can enter it in this box here. So they've made it super, super easy to find the right person for this historical record. And then of course, if no matches came up, then you can go ahead and add a person and use this record information to add that person. So in this case, the right person is the top person here. So I'm going to click her name. Actually, I take that back. I'm not going to click her name. I'm going to click select. If you click her name, you just get the summary card. So we're actually going to click select here, and then as soon as you do that, you get taken over to the source linker, and you can attach the source as usual from there. One final word that I wanted to mention about attaching FamilySearch Historical Records as sources is remember to update the family tree record with any information from the source that you weren't able to add on the source linker. So remember on source linker, it gave us the option to add that marriage date. And in censuses, it will give you the option to add a residence and so forth. But you may see information on the record, such as maybe, I don't know, an occupation that the source linker didn't give you the chance for whatever reason to add. So you can add that information manually. And why would you want to do that? Well, one reason, obvious reason, is it makes the record more accurate. Another reason is that once you've added information, it tends to snowball and help you find even more information. It also helps other researchers who are researching these lines. And then finally, it results in better record hints and duplicate matching. So adding extra information that you find on a record is just a win-win for everybody all the way around. The last thing that I wanted to talk about just briefly is the source box. You may have noticed I actually forgot to point this out. I apologize. But on the source linker page, you have an option to add the source to your source box. Well, what is the source box? What good does it do? What advantages does it have? And how do you access it? You access the source box by clicking your name. And then when you do, you get this drop down and you just click source box. And it takes you back. Oops. Okay, sorry about that. That just blocked out the picture of the source box. That was a mistake. But you can kind of see from the edges, the source box just gives you a list of all the sources that you've got currently added to your source box. Now you are able to add a source to a person in family tree without putting it in the source box. So the source box only shows people that you have that sources that you have chosen to put in the source box. So what are the advantages? What are the benefits? Well, first of all, it's a central location for all your sources. So that's kind of nice if you want to see all your sources in one place. Another advantage is that you can organize the source box by folder. So for instance, over here, you can see that you've got a list of all the folders, and you can also create a new folder. Another thing that has been really great for those of you who worked in new.familysearch.org back before 2012, if you added sources in new.familysearch.org, those sources were all imported over to your source box. And I've got to tell you, I was so happy to hear that because I had added a boatload of sources, literally hundreds of sources in new.familysearch.org, and I did not want to lose all that work. So I was so grateful that they were brought over. Now, they're not Family Search Historical Records sources, but at least it's got the source information so that I can then go to Family Search Historical Records and try to find the equivalent source. And then once I've done that, I detach the old style new.familysearch.org source because it's no longer needed. But basically, this just gives me information. It makes it so I don't have to repeat research that I'd already done. And then finally, this is a place for unattached sources. So imagine that you are, say, researching on Find a Grave or researching on ancestry, and you find a family name, a common family name, like my Bescabie family, as just about any Bescabie I find is related to me, or any Quibell that I find. And you've probably got names like that too that are pretty unusual, and you know that just about any place you find them, or anywhere you find them, if it's one of the key places your ancestors lived, it's going to be one of your relatives. But maybe you find one, say on Find a Grave, and you say, wow, that name does not look familiar, but I am really certain that if I do some more research, I'm going to find out this person fits in my family tree. Well, then you can add them as a source in your source box, and they're there for when you do prove that that person belongs in your family tree. So that brings us to the end of our webinar today. Just as a quick review, we talked about how you can attach Family Search Historical Records as sources from record hints, from the search records box on this, or section on the person page, and then also directly from the historical records site. And then we also reviewed the source box. So thank you everybody so much for being with us today. And Maren, do we have any questions to address?
So it looks like there's a question from Kathryn Schultz. She asks, are there differences for adding other non-family tree sources?
That is a great question, Kathryn. Thank you. And that's actually going to be covered in the next webinar on this topic. I had originally intended to cover it today, but it was just too much. So I hope you'll join us for our next webinar on that topic.
I just wanted to say thank you so much to Kathryn and to our viewers for joining us on this last webinar of 2018. We hope that you have a wonderful holiday and that we will see you next year. As stated before, we could be changing the time of webinars. And if you have a preference of when you would like to join webinars, if you could put that into the chat box, I'd really appreciate it. A recording of this webinar will be available on our YouTube page and on our website by Monday. And if you have any questions, feel free to email at fhl_webinars@byu.edu. Thank you so much and have a wonderful weekend.